Flying of Bois depicts a story based on the Lafayette Escadrille, the famous French squadron of American volunteer pilots during the First World War. Even though it was considered a flop at release, it's entertaining as long as you like dogfight scenes and can stomach the stupid romance story that none of us cared about.
I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you.
As historical fiction, the story is pretty much all made up, and the movie gets plenty of aspects wrong, some of which I'll get to here. As far as characters, there are really just 4 flyboys that are singularly based on real figures from the time, and they're all pretty loose in the details. Reed Cassidy, based on ace pilot Raoul Lufbery. Georgia Senault, the only character that kept the same name. Eugene Skinner, based on Eugene Bullard, who's way cooler than the script character. And the Black Falcon, a German pilot who is obviously the Red Baron. The rest of the characters seem to be made up from scratch. The quiet kid who's good at flying for some reason, the quiet guy's love interest, the rich racist that ends up not being so racist, the guy that sucks at everything, yada yada. Some aspects of these characters could be based on real figures of the Escadrille, but as far as I can tell, they're mostly fictional. Saying nothing about how successful the film was at the box office, the story is just whatever the writers came up with, and not at all the stories of the actual men that were up there. So now, I'm going to tell them to you. At the point where the movie starts, it's 1916 during the Battle of Verdun. At this time, Raoul Lufbery, one of the earliest members of the Escadrille, already had air combat experience as an American volunteer before the squadron was actually formed. Cassidy/Lufbery is portrayed as a 100% American pilot prodigy. In reality, Lufbery, though officially an American citizen, was born a Frenchman. He was born and raised in France and always had a thick French accent whenever he spoke English. His American father left him in France when his mother died at the age of just 1. He was raised by his maternal grandmother and only lived a few years in the United States in his early 20s, and in that time he served in the U.S. Army from 1907 to 1909, gaining his American citizenship. He then found work in French Indochina as an airplane mechanic, where he stayed and gained a love for flying. When the war first broke out in 1914, Lufbery decided to return to his birth country and join the army as a pilot in the French Foreign Legion. He wasn't naturally skilled as a pilot, but over time he became a top performer and was among the first to sign up for the Escadrille. He didn't get along very well with the other American pilots at first. His accent made him hard to understand, and since he had a very different background without much moral schooling, he didn't have a lot in common with them. But in time, he earned their respect as a dependable and deadly fighter pilot, and was then trusted as the unofficial caretaker of the squadron mascots, Whiskey and Soda. Yep, the man raised 2 lions while downing Germans in a biplane. Both lions were sent to a French zoo by the end of the war. Cassidy's death occurs about halfway through the movie as he suicides himself into a German Zeppelin, seeming to be the LZ-47 that was shot down in the Battle of Verdun. More on this later. Lufbery, though, finished his service with the Escadrille when America entered the war in 1917 and joined the Army Air Service. His death came at the age of 33 in May of 1918 when during a dogfight he fell from his plane over the French village of Meran, landing on a metal fence. No one knows exactly how or why he fell, so how it happens depends on who you ask. Though officially he's credited with 17 kills, unofficial estimates put that number as high as 60. Now, could a plane crashing into a Zeppelin cause it to catch fire? I mean, it could probably catch fire, but it wouldn't explode Michael Bay style like it does in the movie. The LZ-47 over Verdun in actuality was taken down by enemy fire, and not a dying American kamikaze anyway, but the flammable hydrogen gas bags would cause the whole thing to go up in a glorious flying bonfire that you could see from miles away. The most effective way of taking out a Zeppelin was with incendiary bullets, which go right through the outer structure and ignite the hydrogen gas bags inside. In 1916, though, the French didn't have a reliable supply available of those, so yeah, you might as well go out like this. It may not be that realistic, but the scene was flashy and gave Cassidy a dramatic death. What can you expect from a movie studio with an advisor that faked all of his military service? I'd say Lufbery's death was pretty dramatic too, just not explodey enough for them to not dramatize it, so what are you going to do? The captain of the Escadrille, Senault, was a distinguished French pilot and the only person to lead the Escadrille from that top position of captain. After the squadron was formed in March 1916, its popularity brought in so many volunteer Americans that he had to pass on a few hundred to another squadron called the Lafayette Flying Corps, which was pretty much the same thing, just not directly under Captain Senault. The movie's focus on such a small group of these guys gives the impression that volunteers were scarce, when in reality, not really. The pilots under Senault respected him, and while in his unit, many became aces with 5 or more confirmed kills. As the US entered the war, the Escadrille was absorbed into American units, and Senault became chief pilot at the French School of Aerial Acrobacy and Combat, until the war ended. He still served in the French military afterwards and went on multiple trips to the US for military political reasons, and after World War II in 1948 he died of a heart attack and was given full military honors at his burial in Paris at the age of 61. Skinner first shows up as an African-American boxer in France who quits his boxing career to join the escadrille and learn to fly. The movie tells you that he moved to France to escape racial discrimination in the southern US. Same general thing with Bullard, with a lot more in Bullard's background. Bullard grew up in Georgia, and after watching his father almost get lynched by a white mob, he began trying to make his way to France, which he eventually did after stowing away on a German ship to England, then later to France for a boxing match set up for him by the famous Dixie Kid. When the war broke out, he joined the French Foreign Legion as an infantryman. After being wounded during the Battle of Verdun, he learned to fly while in recuperation and enlisted to join the escadrille. He was never admitted since the escadrille had stopped admitting candidates, but he did, however, fly for the Lafayette Flying Corps. He was the very first black American pilot and is unofficially credited with 1 or 2 aerial victories through the more than 20 combat missions he flew. At the movie's end, Skinner joins the American forces and is not permitted to fly due to his race, which unfortunately is the same thing that happened to Bullard after he stopped flying for the Lafayette Flying Corps. After the war, Skinner becomes a flying mailman, but Bullard stayed in France, becoming the owner of a successful nightclub which he renamed L'Escadrille. He also started his own gym, naming it Bullard's Athletic Club. When the Second World War began, he spied on Germans that entered his nightclub for the French government, which, by the way, he knew how to speak German too. He died in 1961, back home in America at the age of 66, way cooler than the screenwriters made Skinner. Manfred von Richthofen, whose full name is way too German for me to pronounce, was born in what is now Western Poland to an aristocratic Prussian family. He grew up a hunter and horse rider and began the war as a cavalryman. When the trench warfare of World War I made horses unusable in the actual fighting, Richthofen ended up on food supply and running letters, which he absolutely hated. Flying gave him an out from running war groceries, and he began running recon missions as an observer in a 2-seat. He eventually learned how to fly himself and joined the German Air Service as a pilot. He wasn't very good at first, but eventually got the hang of air combat and got his first confirmed air kill in 1916 over Verdun. In Flyboys, Darth Baron already has plenty of kills at this point, and is by the way in the wrong plane. Richthofen flew an Albatross biplane, mostly, until July 1917 when he got his famous Fokker DR-1 triplane. Now, the movie producers admitted that they knew only a few German fighters during the war were actually triplanes, and only the Red Baron and some of the other pilots in his squadron had red ones, but they wanted to make sure that the viewers knew who was who during the dogfight scenes. Throughout the war, German air units had access to plenty of different makes of fighters: Albatross, Daimler, Fokker biplanes, Hanover, Junkers, just to name a few. And those are all makers that each created multiple types and generations of their fighters. Now, while the triplane is more recognizable, it actually wasn't that great of a fighter at the time the movie takes place. I mean, nobody really had a great plane at the time anyway. It was pretty good at maneuvering tight turns and could do some impressive acrobatics, but over time it proved unreliable. Now, don't get me wrong, with someone like the Red Baron in one, it was a real threat, but the simple design problem of the top wing having a higher lift coefficient than the bottom wings would pull the frame apart and put so much stress on it that it could literally just break the whole plane apart in normal flight. Later models were made with stronger wings in late 1917, and towards the end of the war, the Fokker name with the Red Baron's own input produced the Fokker D7, a biplane that has been named the best of the whole war. Luckily for the British, American, and French, the Red Baron died before he could fly one. Another thing the writers did to piss off the viewers that know something about World War I was making the Black Falcon, and pretty much every other German except this guy, a bloodthirsty douche who likes killing because, hey, the villain needs to be hateable. Richthofen, on the other hand, was very respected by the pilots he flew against and returned that respect openly. That was just the culture of fighter pilots on both sides. For example, he had silver-plated cups made for each and every enemy plane that he shot down as mementos to honor the pilots that he took out. He had to stop after about 60 cups, and silver was needed for the war effort, and the cups became unavailable. In becoming an expert pilot and dogfighter, his success didn't come from crazy moves, though he definitely knew some, but from good tactics, making sure that every dogfight he fought in always started with him already having an advantage over his opponent. His eventual death came when he was shot in the chest by a single bullet while flying low over Moreland Court Ridge during a dogfight. His airplane stalled and crash-landed in a field where he died from his gunshot wound with a final tally of 80 official kills. Like Lufbery, the reason behind Richthofen's death is controversial, and nobody knows where the bullet came from that killed him, or even why he was flying the way he was that day. He did suffer a head injury about a year earlier and was known for erratic behavior afterwards. Some think that this injury made it harder for him to think clearly, and that's why he did something as risky as fly low over hostile territory. The Black Falcon, on the other hand, died in a way that is way more embarrassing. Now, this part was actually entertaining to me, as dumb as it was. We all know it's dumb, and this guy's the worst wingman ever. But in the world of dogfighting, could that ever even happen? I mean, no, it never did. When airplanes first started being used in wartime scenarios, they were all pretty much used for scouting missions and small supply runs. Occasionally, pilots would face off, taking pot shots at each other with pistols, rifles, shotguns, but it never worked. You were hard-pressed to find any record of an airman being killed by any gunfire until machine guns were implemented on their planes. I guess there is a possibility, just with sheer probability, that a pistol could hit a flying man in the face if you shoot at him enough. Odds are pretty slim, though. Now, would the pilot shooting the pistol hit the other guy 1, 2, 3 times in a row with an 80-mile-an-hour wind and a bullet wound in his shoulder? Yeah, no. Probably not. Now, what I've talked about here isn't even close to giving the full picture of what things were like in World War I air combat, or how bad Flyboys was at depicting it. I could make a video twice as long as this one, just talking about the Red Baron. So yeah, there's plenty of details I didn't get to, plenty of life from these guys that I didn't talk about, but I just hope that I piqued some interest for you guys to go and find some of these things out for yourself. Comment section is all yours. If you know something interesting about the time or the movie, let the rest of us know.